What's your name?
Nancy.
Nancy. Hi, Nancy. It's like a personalized session. So, for today, I just thought we could talk about mainly how to be able to identify healthier foods, and the first step is reading food labels. So we'll talk about reading food labels and how to just have tools to manage all the aisles in a supermarket. So do you do your own shopping right now?
I do.
Your grocery shopping? What do you look for when you buy foods?
The common foods that I usually get. I don't do much venturing out.
So you stick to your routine?
Yes. Yes.
And is that typically all your meals, or is it cooking maybe just dinners?
Pretty much. Breakfast, mainly breakfast and dinner.
Okay.
Lunch is usually maybe leftovers or
Right.
bought. But yes, the meats and the side dishes.
Right. So the main thing I think when shopping is to focus on having fresh foods, just because that makes it easier to eat healthier and wholesome rather than focusing on a lot of the prepackaged or processed foods, because then that's when we have to start thinking about reading labels and looking at ingredients and all of that. But for any of the processed foods, obviously reading the food label is really important. So I think that's the first step in knowing what to select, is being knowing what the product contains first, making comparisons, because even one item that is the same across brands can have different ingredients and different nutrients. So it's really important to compare. Now, this is the new label. Got changed. So do you know what the new label has that the other one doesn't? So the newer label actually has a more realistic serving. So before, you could say maybe, well, cereal is half a cup, but people don't really eat half a cup of cereal, right? You eat way more, maybe two. So now they updated it, and the serving size is actually something that is much more realistic for the average person. The calories are much bigger also. Before, everything used to be the same size, but now the calories are much bigger. And they added also the added sugars. So this is really important because it's sugar that is added, not really sugar that's already in food. So something like milk will have sugar, the milk sugar, right, lactose, but it won't have added sugar unless it's something like chocolate milk, and in that case you would see the added sugar amount. The other thing that they did is they added the potassium. They changed a lot of these nutrients down here. Before it used to be potassium wasn't on here, vitamin C was, but what they found is that a lot of people aren't getting enough vitamin D, enough calcium or potassium, so it's important to know how much of these is in food, and they also give the actual amount. So those are just some of the things that are different now with the food label. If you have questions anytime, feel free to stop me. So the other thing about just basics about food labels is not to be swayed by health claims. So there are a lot of different health claims on packages, so don't be swayed by those. Think about also looking at the nutrition facts label also, if you do have special dietary needs, all the allergens are going to be listed on there by law. The top 8 allergens in this country, which are the milk, eggs, tree nuts, peanuts, soy, wheat, and shellfish. And trans fats are also required to be labeled, but there's something important about the trans fats, and that's if a product has less than half a gram of trans fats, it can actually say that it's trans fat free and have a 0 on there. So it's more important to look at the actual ingredients and look for the words partially hydrogenated, because then that means it still has the trans fats. So here are some examples of the health claims. So natural, what does natural mean? Like, it doesn't really have a definition, right? And there's nothing natural about Cheetos, right? So sometimes people may see this and think, oh, well, Cheetos this is the healthier version, it's natural and we'll eat it. This one with Rice Krispies, it says it's an immunity booster. This is an old label. They actually got sued, Rice Krispies, for putting that on there, and I think they had a settle, and it was a $5 million settlement. Because obviously Rice Krispies don't help your immune system. The Quaker Oats, also weight control, and they've changed this also because it's misleading. Oatmeal, yes, it's good for you, but just eating this on its own is not necessarily going to help with weight control. Fruit snacks, made with the little gummies that are made with real fruit. And then the juices, a lot of times we'll say all natural. And this is, I believe this is a Berry Blast, but when you look at the ingredients, the only juice in there is apple juice, and then it has some berry flavorings, so that's also misleading. So I always tell people, don't think about what the product says, all of those claims, just because the food companies are out there to sell. They're not necessarily going to be trying to maybe be honest about their intentions, so a lot of that is very misleading. Some of the qualified food claims, though, are like with tomatoes or tomato sauce. So there is research that those help prevent like prostate and ovarian cancer, even pancreatic cancer. So those are safe. Calcium and like colorectal cancer also, there is an association between that. Green tea and cancer as well. So there are certain claims that are okay and research-based, but it's just important to know which ones. Do you have questions? Okay, so going back to the label, the first thing to look at the label is your serving. Like I said before, this is a more accurate serving size for most people. But still, if you're eating more than this, I think a lot of times people forget that you have to think about how many servings you're actually eating and how many are in the container. So bottom line is that you should be comparing not only the serving size, but how many you're eating and how many are per container. So this is 4 servings. So if you eat the whole container of this, that's a lot of calories, right? So here's a comparison of, let's say something that has 1 cup is 250 calories, so doubling it is more. And that was one of the reasons why the calories are bolder now on the label, just because people tended to ignore that, but that's something that's really important. And a guide for your calories is 40% is low. So if you see something on a label that says low calorie, typically it will have to be 40 calories or less. Something with 100 calories is about moderate, and then you're looking at 400 calories or more. That would be high for any type of food that you're looking at. So if you're having maybe a muffin and it's over 400 calories, that's probably a high calorie food. So just a good guide for you. Fruit is going to be around this, right? Fruit tends to be between 60 to 80 calories, so that's a pretty good serving size or calorie. So let's see. Now, thinking about what nutrients you should limit. These are all together when you're looking at the big label, and I'll go back. So these are all going to be kind of grouped together, the total fat up to the sodium. Those are the ones that you want to be limiting. So let's see. Saturated and trans fats. What kinds of foods are going to have the saturated fats? Do you know what foods are high in saturated fats? Cheese, yeah. All dairy products, right? Especially the whole milk and all dairy products will be high in saturated fat. Pretty much anything that comes from an animal. So your meats, especially beef, will be high in that saturated fat. The dairy products, those are going to be higher in the saturated fat. All animal products. And why are we supposed to limit the saturated fats? Not necessarily. So saturated fats and the trans fats increase the risk for heart disease. So when you're thinking about saturated fat, it's solid at room temperature, right? When you think about butter, lard versus an olive oil, it's solid, right? So that's the saturated fat. It increases the risk of cholesterol in the blood, and that also increases the risk of the heart disease. So we want to avoid that mainly for heart health. The same thing with the trans fats. Trans fats were made to be able to make foods shelf stable. So a lot of, especially like baked goods like donuts and cinnamon rolls and all those breads, and a lot of fried foods in restaurants are going to have trans fats, and those are actually worse than the saturated fat. So again, both of them really increase the risk for heart disease. So important to limit those when you're looking at the fat. Now, here, this is a saturated fat. So overall, 30% of our calories every day, less than 30% really should be coming from fat. The trans fat should always be 0, but like I said, it could still be in there even if it's less than half a gram. If it's less than half a gram, it doesn't have to be stated on here, but look at the ingredients list. Now, there are some fats that are healthier. So the polyunsaturated and the monounsaturated fats are heart healthy. So what kinds of foods contain those healthy fats? So the fats, no, they won't, like fruits and vegetables won't necessarily have fat in them. But there are plant-based sources. Do you know what those are? So nuts, any kinds of nuts and seeds, those are plant-based. They are good sources of the monounsaturated fats. Other really healthy sources of these fats are oils, so olive oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, all those vegetable oils are much better. They're heart healthy, so it's better to be cooking with those. And then nuts, seeds, as well as avocados. Avocados are a very good source of fat and a healthy fat. But that doesn't mean, again, you eat like the whole avocado because it's good for you, right? At the end of the day, fat has more calories per ounce, per gram really, so it's important to know that. Just because it's good for you, you don't overdo it. Because I know I hear that all the time, well, it's good for you, so I'm gonna eat a whole avocado every day. And I mean, maybe you could have it 1 per serving per meal, like a quarter of an avocado, but don't overdo it. The same thing with nuts. They're very good for us. They're a good source of protein, of the good fat, of fiber, but they're also very high in calories. So I know I see a lot of times students with like the quarter gallon bags of nuts, and like, yeah, it's really healthy, but if you go through all of that, that's a lot of calories and it's a lot of fat. And all excess fat and from food turns to fat in our body, right? So we just have to be careful with that. So 30%, so limit your fat to 30% of your calories and saturated fat to 10%. And we'll talk about the daily values in a bit, but that's just something that's really important. All right, so moving on before so we could get to this supermarket aisle. What you do want to get enough of though, oh no, so one more thing, cholesterol and sodium. So again, these we want to limit. The cholesterol, again, like I mentioned, it's also important to limit that because it is going to increase our cholesterol, blood cholesterol, and then increase the risk of heart disease. Now, our body makes cholesterol, so we don't need to necessarily be eating it from foods. So for people who are maybe vegan or vegetarian, they don't have to worry about it because our body will make it. And the reason I say vegan and vegetarian is because all cholesterol comes from animals. So any kind of animal food is going to have cholesterol in it. And going back to the health claims, a lot of times I see potato chips or crackers and it says cholesterol free, but it's obviously cholesterol free, right? Because it's not coming from an animal. So again, don't fall for the health claims. Any questions about cholesterol, the sodium? The sodium also should be limited to 2,300 milligrams for adults. Per day, yeah. So 2,400. If you have high blood pressure, it could be maybe 1,500 milligrams. But 1 teaspoon is about 2,400 milligrams. So it's not a lot. And most people don't get sodium from salt on food. A lot of times it's from the processed food we're eating. So checking the sodium for the packages for sodium level, that's something really important. All right, so now we could talk about, here's the sodium. All right, so we need to get enough of these. So the vitamin D, the calcium, all of these are much more, the ones that we do want more of. So how much calcium should we be eating? Does anyone know? Or where does calcium come from before I tell you? What foods are a good source of calcium? Kale. Yes, it does. Kale, all dark leafy greens are going to be a good source of calcium, definitely. What else? Where else does calcium come from? Milk. All dairy products are going to have a good source of calcium. So if you don't like milk, what about soy milk? Would soy milk have calcium in it? So most of them actually do. So if you don't drink regular cow's milk, and you like soy milk or even rice milk, look for something that is fortified with calcium and vitamin D. Most soy milks out there on the market are, but there are other, I've seen like coconut milk, and now there's hemp milk, almond milk, like there's everything out there, right? A lot of those may not be fortified with calcium or vitamin D. So if you are want to drink these alternative milks, just make sure that you're getting something that's fortified. And that's one of the benefits of milk. I know a lot of people are sort of like anti-dairy. There's an anti-dairy group out there, but the thing with milk is that per ounce, it's probably the richest source of calcium out there, and it's you can absorb it much more. Something like spinach or the kale, our body is not going to absorb as much of the calcium, but we should still be eating those. The same with beans. Beans are a good source of calcium, so really important. So for calcium, we need about 1,500 milligrams. So, one of the ways to know about if it's a good source, if something you're eating is a good source, is to look at the daily value. Now, the daily value, this is based on just an average 2,000 calorie diet. So some people have to eat less, some people have to eat more, so you kind of adapt it to your needs. But looking at this, there's a 5-20 rule. So something that has 5% is low. So if we're looking at this, you're looking at a vitamin A. It's a low, this has very low vitamin A. 20% is high. So if you look at the fat on here, it's 18. So this is getting to be a high fat food. So it's probably not the best. It's actually mac and cheese. This label is for mac and cheese. So it's pretty high in the fat. Looking at the sodium, you're at 20%. So that means that it's pretty high. If we look at the other label, where'd it go? This one, I guess it's the same one, huh? All right. Well, does everyone understand that though? The daily value, it's the easiest way to know if you're on target, because a lot of times we don't know what the actual amounts are. So thinking of food, is it high in fat or not? If it's up to that 20% daily value, that's a high fat food. So you would want to stick to something that's 5% or low for the nutrients you want to limit, and something that's higher up to the 20% for the ones that we want to get more of. All right, so those are kind of basics about food labels. But the other thing you want to also focus on is ingredients. So these two are yogurts. Now you have a light blueberry yogurt versus a fat-free yogurt. Now this one has less ingredients. It contains the active cultures. Does anyone know what these are good for? Like when you eat yogurt, what the live cultures are, why those are good?
For your intestines, right?
Yep. So your gut health keeps you healthy. There's the microbiome in us. Has everyone heard that? So they call our gut the second brain because I mean a lot of functions and just our overall health a lot of it has to do with our gut, and then like you said, intestines, and making sure you have good bacteria in there is really important. And the way you do that is by eating foods with these active and live cultures like yogurts and probiotics. So there's the kefir. So foods like that are good for our gut. This one, it's yogurt, but it doesn't have those cultures, and it has things like asulfame potassium, which is a fake sugar that's not really good for us. It has red number 40, which is a food dye, which again we want to avoid. There's sugar, gelatin, cornstarch. So looking at the ingredients also is something that's really important. And one of the things I tell people is when you're looking at ingredients, try to get foods that have 5 or less ingredients, just because they're gonna be much more wholesome. If there's something in there you can't pronounce, it's probably better not to buy it. So when you go shopping, don't go hungry, right? Because it leads to impulse buys. Make a list. Does anyone here make a list and plan out your menus? All of you? Oh, good. So that helps you stick to your plan. Being purposeful. So making sure you have a game plan. Know your store, know your home closest grocery store so that you're able to navigate it without getting lost in aisles and things like that. So pretty much with your grocery stores, they all look the same in how things are laid out. So this is our store. I was gonna have like an HEB plan here, a layout, but it was just too much. So I'm like narrowing it down. So starting with the produce. One of the best things, and also let me back up, when we are going to the store, most of the important things are in the perimeter of the store. So a lot of times we don't even have to go down the aisles, and that's just because a lot of the processed foods will be down the center of the aisles. So when we're thinking about produce, buying in season is best. Buying fresh is probably the best one, but the second best is frozen. So there isn't anything wrong with frozen fruits and vegetables, the plain ones. They're just as healthy and as good for you as the fresh. A lot of times buying in season though means that it's cheaper and it tastes better. shooting for 2 cups of vegetables, which is not a lot. The recommendation for vegetables is 2 cups a day. And if you think about it, it's not a lot, but most people in this country are not eating enough. So 2 cups of fruit, 2.5 cups of vegetables. Sorry, so really important. Also different colors. Why are the different colors important?
The different colors have different like things in them. Different, I forget the name of it, but
Yep, you're on the right track. Yeah, so each color represents a different, like a vitamin or antioxidant. There are things called phytochemicals, which are all the different chemicals in fruits and vegetables that give them their pigment, but also give them their health benefits. So like looking at purple foods such as blueberries, even though those are blue, but there's like blueberries, eggplant, all those types of berries have the anthocyanins, which are prevent cancer, so they do have cancer-fighting properties. There are things like the lycopene, which makes the tomatoes red, and those are also cancer-fighting, especially for skin cancer. So there are a lot of really beneficial things with eating different colors of fruits and vegetables. So that's why I always say choose your rainbow of fruits and vegetables, right? There are people who maybe have a limited taste for different vegetables. So I know that I always get this question, like if like I only like one vegetable, and I say, well, that's fine. If you only like one, at least eat that one. It's better than nothing. All right, so moving on to our bakery. So over here, best to just zoom by it, right? Because a lot of times it's going to be maybe donuts or cinnamon rolls or things like that. There are some places that have maybe like they're making corn tortillas, which is a whole grain, or even the wheat tortillas, and those are probably better. But in here, most products may be made of like refined flours, so that's not going to be the healthiest. And a lot of bakeries do use the trans fats, so that's another reason to just be mindful of what you pick up there and make sure you read the label first before you buy anything at the bakery. So your deli meats. So always choose the lean proteins. So what are some of the lean proteins?
chicken or
Fish, chicken.
some beef. I think it depends.
Some beef. So yeah, like the eye-round, roast, sirloin, tenderloin. Your ground beef should be extra lean. Also, things like you said, the chicken, there's turkey, those are the leaner types of meat. Buying in bulk sometimes is cheaper, and then freezing it or pre-portioning those foods also. In the deli, just be mindful about the foods because a lot of cold cuts are very high in sodium, so be mindful of the deli items. But overall, choose fish and chicken more often. Fish we should be eating twice a week, if not more, especially the fatty fish. Which ones are the fatty fish? Salmon, what else? Tuna? What'd you say? Salmon, tuna. There are things like mackerel and herring, but we don't really eat those in this country.
And we do in the Caribbean,
Oh, you do? Okay, good.
especially mackerel, codfish.
Yeah, so those are good. So yeah, but having some fatty fish because it's good in the omega-3s, and our body doesn't make omega-3s. We need to get it from food, so fish is a good source of that. Other things, so if you don't like meat or anything like that, where should you be getting your protein from? Beans, yeah, very good. Where else?
Soy.
Soy products, yep. Tofu or edamame, like when we go to sushi restaurants, they have that edamame. Eggs are a very good source of the protein. So, are eggs bad for you?
No, they are really good.
Yeah, they're good for you. So over the years, eggs have gotten a bad rap because they're high in cholesterol, but they're good for you. So one of the things with cholesterol is that saturated fat in food raises your blood cholesterol more than eating foods with high cholesterol. So while eggs do have the high cholesterol, they're not going to necessarily raise your cholesterol as much as something with saturated fat in it. Now, what is the typical American breakfast?
Scrambled eggs,
Scrambled eggs with bacon, right? So which one is the saturated fat in there? The bacon. So the bacon or the sausage. So those are the ones that really are causing the harm, not necessarily the eggs. So yeah, in that meal, keep the eggs, just swap out your bacon or other meat patties or something like that. Or eat it once in a while. Once in a while is fine. All right, questions about your delis and meats? So next is dairy. Now, here we want to have the low-fat dairy. And again, we talked about the saturated fat, right? This is probably one of the more saturated fats, the cheese and the milk. Now, with the yogurt, what's the best kind of yogurt that we should be eating? Like a plain, regular yogurt, right? With cultures, yes, definitely. And watch the sugars. A lot of yogurt out there has added sugar, and it just adds more calories, more unnecessary sugar, really. They put, nowadays that everything has sugar in it. So looking at the label is really important. But with the yogurt, making sure that it's plain, and then you can add any kind of fruit, if you want cereal or other type of flavoring, rather than getting something that already has way too much sugar in it. And should you be eating the whole fat, full fat? It depends, right? With sugar, something like a Greek yogurt, let's say it's a 2% fat, I say it's okay because there's so much protein in there. Per cup, there's probably about 20 grams of protein, which is maybe half of what an average woman would need in a day. So we don't need that much protein, right? So there's plenty of protein in there. And if you have the fat, that's a very satiating meal. So I say it's fine if you want to have the 2% fat yogurt, but making sure that there's balance throughout the day too, right? Because that is going to be a lot of the saturated fat. But it could be a very filling meal if you put some fruit in there, some granola, things like that. So thinking about that balance. And then if you are lactose intolerant or have a milk allergy, again, thinking about other sources of food where you could get your calcium from. And so we talked about some of the other sources of calcium already. All right, so your frozen foods. So what should you be eating from your frozen food section?
Berries.
Berries? Mm-hmm. I love frozen berries because you could get them all season long, and they're just as good as the fresh ones and sometimes even cheaper. So definitely berries. What else should you be getting from your frozen food section?
That's healthy.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the veggie mix, like with the
So your veggies, right? So you want to stick to your plain fruits and vegetables. There are a lot of veggie options out there, but some of them may not be so good. I've seen the Green Giant, like cheese and broccoli and butter and something else, right? So just be careful with those because they're going to be higher in that saturated fat and the sodium. So you want to make sure you're getting everything plain. You can also, so frozen entrees, they're convenient. If you are getting frozen entrees, just make sure it's around 400 to 500 calories. and less than 600 milligrams, and that may be at the higher end. There are actually a lot of much better options nowadays, but if you're gonna get your frozen entrees, I understand it's a convenience food, but just make sure you compare the labels, making sure that there isn't too much sodium in there isn't too much saturated fat or even trans fat. God, there's a brand, Hungry. You guys know what that is? Hungry something? Yes. Hungry Man. It's Hungry Man, right? And those are, I mean, huge. It's like 1,000 calories and they're loaded with salt and fat. So that's not what I would recommend. Look for some of the other ones that are, lower in calories. But pretty much this is it for your frozen food. Notice, your ice cream is not on here. That could be a once in a while thing. With foods like that, if you want to have it, I say you just go out somewhere and have a treat, as opposed to having it in your house and you're buying it and you're always tempted to eat ice cream. If you want to eat it, it could be a treat and you go out of your way to get it. Or you could get fudgesicles or something like that if those satisfy you. Now the canned goods, are all canned goods bad? No. Which ones are?
I said no. I was wrong.
No, you're right. I repeated what you said. You're right. So which ones are the good ones? What are your good canned foods that you should be purchasing? So low sodium, definitely, or no salt added. But what kinds of foods are good that come in from a can?
Corn, beans, green beans.
Your beans, right? All of the beans are really good. So not all canned foods are bad. I think a lot of times we think of canned food and people shy away from it, but beans are really an excellent source of fiber, protein. Compared to meat, they're so much cheaper, like if you want a good source of protein. So definitely beans, making sure that they're low sodium or no salt added, or you could rinse them. So if you rinse your beans, you do get some of that salt away if you do get the regular ones. So make sure you rinse them. Tomatoes are also good. The canned ones are fine. There are things you had mentioned, like the corn, so that's fine. So there are a lot of canned foods out there. Tuna, right? There's canned tuna. So those are all fine to eat. It's just making sure with the vegetables or beans that they are the no salt added or lower sodium. Any questions about canned foods? Okay. So your snacks, if you do want to get snacks, what should you be looking for?
Like a cereal bar? Or?
So if you're getting a cereal bar, what should you be looking for?
No chocolate chips.
The one with like the Fiber One? Or?
So Fiber One, so if you're getting any kinds of snacks or crackers, make sure that you're looking at the trans fat. Make sure that they're
Trans fat and sugar.
less sugar, and the trans fat, that the ingredient doesn't say it contains partially hydrogenated fat. So that's something that's going to be a really ingredient. If you are getting like the granola bars, how you said, if it says whole wheat or like whole grain, the first ingredient should say whole. If it's not whole in the ingredient list, it means it's a refined product. Yes?
Do you have, so similar to the frozen food, you said it's like should be less than this much sodium, less than this many. What type of granola or snack do you in granola bars like?
So.
How big is a snack in calorie wise and all that?
So a lot of times it's going to depend on your overall, how many calories you would need in a day. So for someone with on an average of 2,000 calories per day, if you're eating 3 meals a day, maybe you're doing like 500 calorie meals. How much is that? 1,500? And then if you're doing 3 snacks in between, you could do like maximum 100 or 150 calorie snacks. So remember, snacks are snacks. It's not a full meal. You're not eating like another little full meal in between. It's something that carries you over till your next meal, right? So it could be a piece of fruit. It could be maybe some yogurt with fruit or like cheese and crackers. So something small. You're not going out and getting like a little, I don't know, some fries and sandwich or things like that. Or a slice of pizza, right? That's not a snack. But yeah, on average, 100 to 250 calories. So watch the sugar. Again, shorter list of ingredients is better, just because then you start thinking about all the additives and preservatives that are added here to your snacks. Now, snack packs. Have you seen the snack packs? Like everything has a little snack pack now, right? It's 100 calorie, Chips Ahoy or.
I've seen some with like cheese, like some type of sausage meat or something.
Oh, right, those two.
What do you recommend if you do select a snack pack?
So with the snack packs, a lot of those are going to be, the ones I've seen are the 100 calorie snack packs. So remember that they're still processed. They're not going to really have any nutrients or beneficial nutrients in them. So if you're going to have, thinking about the little Chips Ahoy snack pack, if you like those cookies, I would say eat a regular cookie that is going to actually satiate you, as opposed to these snack packs that are low in calories but maybe just don't satisfy you in the same way, and then you end up eating, I don't know, 3-4 snack packs, or you end up eating your snack pack and then the cookie that you were trying to avoid in the first place. So a lot of times that's what happens with these little snack packs. Or does that happen to you? Are you happy?
Yeah. No? Okay, yeah, it happens. I mean, yeah.
So,
Yeah, so you have to be sitting 5-6 hours, you can
right.
have your snacks there.
Yeah, so a lot of times they're more processed. So I would say for snacks, try to get your wholesome snacks, something that is fresher and that is going to fill you up more. When you are having snacks, try to pair a good protein and a carb. So protein could be maybe like some string cheese with some whole grain crackers, or even like a hard-boiled egg and like a small orange. So having that pairing, it's much better and it's going to fill you up for longer. Like maybe some hummus with veggies. So just foods that are going to have that balance, but again, it's still a small snack. It's not going to be your full meal. Questions? Okay. So that's why I just say that about snack packs. Be mindful, because some of them, it's like trying to be a lighter version of something else, and then it's lower calories, but sometimes it doesn't hit the spot. So that's sometimes when we tend to overeat, is when we're looking for that something. So, all right, moving on to your pasta, rice, bread section. So what should you be looking for in this aisle? What was it? Whole grains, yeah. Or multi-grains. So again, with this one, always making sure if you're buying bread, if it's whole grain bread, whole wheat should be on there, or whole whatever else, whole grain. Sometimes it'll say whole grain on there, but if it's not 100%, it's going to be enriched. So making sure that you're reading the ingredients as well. So here, making sure you're also getting enough foods with fiber in them. So your cereals, your breads, all of those, you're looking for more than 5 grams of fiber per serving. Most of us don't get enough fiber in our diets. And what's fiber good for? Digestion, keeps things moving right. It also helps you feel fuller. Different types of fiber help reduce cholesterol, so it's also important to have fiber in our diets. So try things like wild rice, quinoa, there's barley. Does anyone already eat these types of grains? So those are full of fiber, some protein in there, so they're just make for healthier meals. And now I've seen a lot of pre-cooked, like brown rice and things like that, and most of them are pretty good because they'll just be the grain and maybe some salt, no other fillers, so there are a lot of things out there. The other thing to be mindful of when looking at these labels is sugar. There's a lot of added sugar, especially in a lot of breads and a lot of cereals. So looking for anything that ends in OSE is going to be a sugar. So thinking about like dextrose is going to be a sugar. Like there's so many out there. There's the honey is still a sugar. There are things like the raw cane sugar, which at the end of the day is still sugar. Inverted sugar, evaporated sugar. There's high fructose corn syrup, right, which is in everything, so not great for us. Dextrin is something that's also used in a lot of foods. So looking at the labels, and that's why I say stick to 5 ingredients or less, and odds are it won't have that much sugar in there. And the way the ingredients are listed is by weight. So if the first ingredient on there is sugar, it means it's the most, that's what it's mostly made of. And you'd be surprised at how many cereals, it's sugar is the first thing on there. So where are the most sugary cereals located on the aisle?
Like at kids' eye level?
It's at eye level, right? So your kids just nag for you to get that. But with the cereals, and we'll go here. Compare the labels, and they are at eye level. So if you have cereal, try to make it something that isn't so high in sugar. There's some fiber in there. Is anyone here a cereal eater? Like for breakfast? Right, and it depends, right? So if you do like cereal, again, make sure you're getting some fiber from it. Make sure it's at least fortified also. Now, something like Total, or a lot of those that have all of your vitamins, you're most likely not going to be absorbing the iron in the cereals, and that's because if you're eating it with milk, the calcium in the milk inhibits your body from absorbing the iron. So if you wanted to, you could eat your cereal with orange juice, and at least you're getting the iron, especially for women.
Like almond milk or something, like an alternative is still...
If it's fortified with calcium, it'll be the same thing.
Oh, okay.
So it's the calcium. Calcium, inhibits the absorption of iron. And so this is important if you do have kids, just because children are much more prone to iron deficiency anemia. So a lot of times you're feeding them the cereal with milk, but they're not getting that iron out of it. Just be careful with the cereals. A lot of them, I say, are more like a junk food because there's so much sugar in them. So just be mindful of what's in them, and then compare the different ingredients. So your beverages, what should you be drinking? Water, right? So that's the best drink that we could be consuming. So whether it's sparkling water or just plain water, those are fine. Sugary drinks, obviously, too much sugar in there, right? It's empty calories. So if you're drinking sodas, juices, even coffee drinks with too much sugar in them, energy drinks that have a ton of sugar, that's probably one of the most unhealthy habits we could have. So I would say wean off of all the sugar. The artificial sugars, like in diet drinks, are fine, but in moderation. And also be careful with a lot of those health drinks, like the vitamin drinks. They're expensive, and a lot of times they're not really necessary. They're not healthier. A lot of them are vitamin C based. And does anyone know where the excess vitamin C in our body goes?
to do with your pigment or something?
No, you just excrete it. You urinate it. So pretty much you're wasting a lot of that, right? Because we don't need a lot of those added like vitamins, B vitamins, or the vitamin C, those water-soluble vitamins. If you have a healthy, balanced diet, most likely you will be getting all those nutrients. And if you don't, I mean, a multivitamin's fine, but not necessarily those drinks. What about alcohol? Is that healthy?
In moderation?
In moderation. It can be, right? So 2 drinks for men is fine for your cardiovascular health. For women, though, here's the thing with women. So 1 drink would be the serving for women, and that could also be good for cardiovascular health. However, there is research indicating that also increases the risk of breast cancer. So I don't know, for women it depends. Now if you go beyond that, the cardiovascular benefits just go away, right? So if you're like having 5 drinks a day or something, there's no benefit there for men. But just something to be aware of with drinking in moderation is fine, like if you're having wine or even beer. But again, there's calories in there, it's empty calories, right? Alcohol has 7 calories per gram, so it's more than something like your carbs, or even though there are carbs are like 4 grams, and then the fat is 9. So it's in between there. So it's still, right, still high calories. So just be careful with that. All right, so what happens at the checkout? Candy bars.
They have like sodas.
They have sodas, candy bars, just all kinds of things, right? Now they have the ice creams too. So just avoid it, right? It's one of those impulse buys, and if you're hungry and you're craving something, odds are you're gonna get it. But it's best just to avoid it. And use your rewards card if you have coupons. A lot of times those go a long way, especially if you're trying to budget. But yeah, just avoid any of the junk food at the checkout counter. So, all right, overall, so nutrition is not one size fits all. You all have different lifestyles, you all have different needs, so just be aware of what those are so that you're able to make the best choices for you and your lifestyle and still be healthier. And just think about maybe spending a little more time in the store next time, just so you're comparing the different products. Like I said earlier, sometimes you have the same product but different brands, and they all vary across the different brands. So comparing them is important, and maybe looking for an alternative also. So other types of foods, we talk about the ice cream, or maybe those snacks that you like. You could still eat them. They could still be part of your diet. It's just making sure that there's balance in everything. And so in summary, so make sure you read your labels. So we talked about things to look for in a label. Buy fresh whenever possible. That's probably the most important, fresh, wholesome food, because you don't have to read a label there, right? It's good for you. We know that it's good for you. Keep your kitchen stocked with healthy foods. If we buy all the ice cream, if we buy, those donuts or other high fat, high sodium snacks, it's not as easy to keep that healthy lifestyle, right? So just don't buy them at all. And try not to focus on a single nutrient, but just the overall quality of food. That's also something that's really important, just thinking about the overall quality as opposed to, I know sometimes there are trends out there with, this is good in vitamin D, or this vitamin, that, but look at the overall quality of the food. And think about cooking. Cooking is fun. It could be a good family activity. So a lot of times when we're preparing our own food, it's healthier because we know what we put in it and how to control those foods or those different ingredients in there. Now, a lot of times people tell me that it's more expensive. Like, wow, healthier food is more expensive. And that's not necessarily true all the time. There are certain foods that may cost more. But what I always tell people is that, I mean, we spend a lot of money on different things. But at the end of the day, our health is also important, and we should be investing in our health, not, you know, just these other things that we buy, but it should be our priority. So spend a little more money on our health right now so that we could have a good quality of life later, just because so many chronic diseases are preventable, and a lot of them are caused by just unhealthy diets and being sedentary. So overall, just, you know, if you spend a little more every week, it may be worth it in the long run. So any questions? No?
Maybe you
Yes.
went over this in the beginning, but do you recommend anything for like women's health to eat every day? Something like a certain produce, or like, do you recommend anything being a dietitian?
So for women, I recommend calcium. Definitely making sure you have enough calcium. Also, really a lot just, I mean, talked about berries, but a lot of those fruits and produce, women, so in terms of heart health, a lot of times people forget that women are actually also at a high risk for like heart disease and stroke and these things, and sometimes we forget about that, but making sure that you're having enough
Antioxidants? Is that why you say berries?
yeah, all your berries, but all your fruits and vegetables are going to have those, so always making sure you have that is really important.
Do you recommend like a certain amount per day for an average person?
I mean, do like your 3 servings of fruit per day is fine. Yeah, we don't have to go overboard with it. The other thing I was going to say is iron. Also for women, women are more prone to have, you know, anemia, things like that. So making sure you're having plenty of foods with iron. So whether it's beans, preferably, I mean, beef is a good source of iron, but we don't want to eat too much beef. So getting it from like lentils or other types of beans is good. Anything else?
Thank you.
All right,
Well, for
that's
coming,
it.
We're going to do a drawing real